You've probably had this moment. You read the description of your sun sign, expecting to see yourself reflected back like a mirror, and instead you get this strange, hollow feeling of, that's just not me. Maybe you're a Leo who hates attention, maybe you're a Virgo whose apartment looks like a crime scene, and the easy explanation everyone reaches for is that astrology is generic nonsense, vague enough to apply to nobody in particular, or so broad that it fits everyone equally badly. That explanation is satisfying because it's simple: one sign, one paragraph, one verdict, case closed. But here's the detail that complicates the tidy dismissal. Astrologers have never actually claimed that your sun sign is supposed to describe the whole of you. That claim was manufactured by newspaper horoscope columns in the 20th century because a 12-way split is a lot easier to print than calculating an entire birth chart for every reader. So the real question isn't, why doesn't my sign describe me? The real question is, why so many people were told it should, and what's actually happening in the chart when the sun sign and the lived personality seem to go their separate ways. Let's start with why the sun sign story feels so convincing in the first place. Your sun sign is the only placement most people know without doing any work. You just need a birthday. No birth time, no birth city, no chart calculation. It's astrology's front door, and because it's the only door most people ever walk through, it gets treated as the whole house. The sun represents your core identity, your basic sense of self, the thing you're growing toward across a lifetime. That's genuinely important. It's just not the only thing running the show. Here's the first real complication. Your rising sign, also called your ascendant, is calculated from your exact birth time and location, and it describes something different from the sun. Think of the ascendant as the entrance hall of a house and the sun as the person who actually lives inside it. Visitors walk through the entrance hall first. They form impressions there before they ever reach the living room. If your rising sign is Scorpio, people experience you as intense, guarded, quietly perceptive, long before they get close enough to notice that your sun in Gemini actually makes you curious, chatty, and restless once you trust someone. So when a person says, "I don't relate to my sign," half the time what they mean is, the way I show up doesn't match the way I feel inside, and that's not a contradiction in astrology. That's the ascendant and the sun doing two completely different jobs. Then there's the moon, and this one trips people up constantly. The moon governs your emotional default, your instinctive reactions, the version of you that shows up when nobody's performing for an audience. A Capricorn sun with a Pisces moon can look on paper disciplined and ambitious, but privately dissolve into daydream and sentiment the moment the office door closes. If someone built their sense of what a Capricorn is supposed to feel like purely off the sun sign description, the moon is going to keep contradicting it every single day in the privacy of their own head. Now stack on top of that the concept of a stellium, which is just the astrological term for a cluster, usually 3 or more planets sitting in one sign or one house. If your sun is in Aries, but your Venus, Mercury, and Mars are all crowded into Pisces, that Pisces cluster is going to outvote a lone Aries sun in daily behavior. You'll still have that flicker of Aries directness somewhere in you, but the majority of your planets are casting their vote for something dreamier and more conflict avoidant. A single sun placement against a 4-planet stellium is not a fair fight. It's one instrument trying to be heard over a small orchestra that's already decided on a different key. Dignity matters here too, and this is where traditional astrology gets specific instead of vibes-based. Every sign has planets that are considered strengthened or weakened depending on where they sit, based on rulership, exaltation, detriment, and fall. A sun in Libra is technically in its sign of detriment, meaning it doesn't operate with full strength there, because Libra's ruler is Venus, and the sun's natural home is Leo. That doesn't make a Libra sun bad, but it does mean the identity often expresses through relationship, negotiation, and other people's reflections rather than through the bold, self-assured confidence people associate with solar energy generally. The sign description sold in a magazine horoscope rarely accounts for dignity at all, so it flattens out these strength differences and treats every sun sign as equally potent, which they simply aren't. Aspects complicate things further. If your sun sits in a hard aspect to Saturn, a tight square or opposition that can genuinely mute the sign's typical confidence, replacing it with self-doubt, delayed self-expression, or a tendency to hide your natural traits until later in life. I've seen Leo suns with Saturn squares who spent their 20s looking almost nothing like the textbook Leo, warm but withdrawn, talented but terrified of visibility, and then watched that same person bloom into the expected confidence in their 40s once the Saturn return did its work. The sign was always there. The aspect was just applying pressure, like a hand pressed against a spring, and it takes time and maturity before that spring gets to extend fully. House placement of the sun matters too, and this one gets skipped constantly. A sun tucked into the 12th house, the house of retreat, solitude, and the subconscious, often produces someone who is privately very much their sign, but who doesn't perform it publicly the way an outward-facing house placement would. A Sagittarius sun in the 12th house might have all that classic wandering philosophical hunger internally, while looking quiet and almost hermit-like from the outside. Compare that to a Sagittarius sun in the 10th house, blasting its energy directly into career and public reputation for anyone to see. Same sign, same core drive, two completely different visibility settings, like the same light bulb wired to a dimmer switch versus wired straight to a floodlight. Now, someone watching this might raise the strongest objection, which is fair, so let's sit with it honestly. Maybe the mismatch isn't the chart's fault at all. Maybe some people just have shaky self-awareness and they'd fail to recognize themselves in any accurate personality description, astrological or otherwise. That's a legitimate possibility, and astrology can't rescue someone from a lack of self-reflection, but it doesn't explain the specific, consistent pattern astrologers actually observe, which is that people tend to relate far more strongly to their moon or rising sign description than to their sun sign description, especially before their mid-30s. That's not random confusion. That's a structural pattern pointing to the fact that different placements dominate at different life stages, and the sun's themes, the ones about integrated, self-authored identity, often don't fully click into place until Saturn's return in your late 20s gives you the first real adult draft of yourself. There's also the issue of birth time accuracy, which deserves mention because it's boring but important. If your birth certificate time is off by even 15 or 20 minutes, your rising sign can shift into a neighboring sign entirely, and if you're near a sign boundary, your moon can shift too. Someone convinced they're not like a Scorpio rising might actually be a late Libra rising with an unverified birth time, and no amount of philosophical hand-wringing about astrology's validity fixes a data entry error from a hospital nurse in 1994. Now let's escalate this a level further, because there's a bigger mechanism hiding underneath all of this individual chart nuance, and it involves the outer planets. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto move so slowly that they sit in the same sign for years, sometimes over a decade, which means entire generations share the exact same placement. Everyone born between roughly 1995 and 2008 has Pluto in Sagittarius. That placement says almost nothing about you individually because it says the same thing about millions of other people your age. It's a collective signature, describing a generation's relationship to belief, truth, and ideology, not a personal quirk that separates you from your peers. So when people flatten a chart down to sun sign only, they're often unconsciously blending in generational placements that were never meant to carry personal weight, diluting the individual signal even further. It's a little like trying to identify someone by the fact that they were born in the same decade as everyone else in the room. Technically true, personally useless. So here's where the metaphor I've been circling finally earns its keep. Your sun sign is the title of the book. It tells you the genre, gives you a hint of tone, sets an expectation before you've read a page. But the ascendant is the cover art shaping first impressions. The moon is the emotional register running underneath every scene. The stelliums are the recurring characters who hijack the plot. The aspects are the tension and pacing, and the houses are which rooms of the story get lit up for the reader to actually see. If you judge the whole book by its one-word genre label, you're going to be occasionally wrong, sometimes hilariously so. A romance-labeled book that's actually a slow-burn tragedy still technically fits the label. It's just not the full story, and it was never supposed to be read that way alone. Where the metaphor breaks down is this. A book's genre label doesn't actively interact with its plot, but your sun sign does interact with the rest of your chart. It's not sitting passively on a shelf. Your Leo sun in hard aspect to Saturn isn't unrelated to your Saturn placement. It's in an ongoing relationship with it, shaping how boldly or cautiously that Leo identity gets to unfold across your actual lifetime. The sun isn't a static label. It's a planet in motion within a system of other planets in motion, and identity in astrology's own logic is never a single note. It's always a chord. None of this means your sun sign is meaningless, and I want to be careful here. Because the takeaway isn't ignore your sign, it's fake. The sun still describes something real. Your direction of growth, the identity you're building toward across decades, the story arc rather than the opening scene, it's just one placement among many, doing one specific job among several. If it doesn't feel like you yet, that might mean you haven't finished becoming it, or it might mean another placement is simply louder in your current chapter of life. So maybe pull up your actual chart, not just your birthday, and look at your rising sign and your moon alongside your sun. Notice which one actually sounds like the person your closest friends would describe, and which one sounds like the person you're quietly working toward becoming. I'd genuinely like to know which placement felt more like you when you finally looked past the sun alone. Drop it in the comments, and if this kind of chart-level digging is your thing, subscribe because we're just getting started taking these placements apart one at a time.